All right, we're going to look now at something called the unit circle, something that's going to help us quite a bit with a lot of the trigonometry we're going to do. The unit circle is simply a circle that has a radius of 1. All right, so this has a radius of 1 here. Okay, this is 1, this is 1. Coordinates -1, -1. If that's the origin, 0 in the center there. All right, the coordinates of any point on this unit circle here, let's call them x, y. Right? If you think about it, you can draw a little reference triangle here where this distance right here is x, and then that vertical distance is y. And in a triangle, you know that if it's a right triangle, then you know that the Pythagorean relationship holds there. And then what you have is you have x squared plus y squared equals 1 squared, or just 1. That's the equation of the unit circle. That equation right there. The x coordinate squared plus the y coordinate squared equals 1. All right, so we're going to use that equation for some of the things we're going to do. But before we do that, let's look at this in a little bit more of a dynamic way. There we go. So this allows us to move the point around this unit circle here. So this circle has a radius of 1, right? This line right here is the radius, and it's 1. This triangle now, I can move this point around, and I get a little reference triangle anywhere I go, right? And the coordinates of that point are shown up here. And they're also shown as part of this equation here, right? X squared plus y squared equals 1. That's the equation of this circle, because this circle is the set of all points where that relationship holds between the x squared and between the x coordinate and the y coordinate. So as I move around here, one of the coordinates becomes negative. Doesn't matter though, because when you're squaring it, that makes it a positive number. All right, that relationship always holds over there. It's always equal to 1 anywhere you go on here. All right, all the way around. Now, if I was to make this a different radius, so if I make this a bigger circle now, well, now it doesn't work anymore, right? That's something bigger. The equation of that circle now with a radius of 1.2 is x squared plus y squared equals 1.2 squared, or 1.44. Now, if I was to make that smaller, same thing. This thing gets, this hypotenuse, the radius squared, gets it to be a smaller number. But when I make it exactly a unit circle, a radius of 1, I get that nice equation there, x squared plus y squared equals 1. All right, let's go back to our other page. So we're going to use that equation to work with coordinates on that circle, which are in turn going to eventually help us work with trig ratios for angles in standard position. All right, we're going to look now at using that new equation that we have for the unit circle and determining points on there that have a given y coordinate here. So in this case, -2/5, which of course we could also call -0.4 if that's more convenient, depending on what we're going to do. We're going to look at this two different ways. We are going to work with that decimal value once, and then we're going to look at exact value with fractions, determine it twice. All right, first we're going to need a unit circle on our set of axes there. So circle with radius 1. There we go. Now to work out the x coordinate that goes with this y coordinate, we can just start with our equation. We know that the equation is x squared plus y squared equals 1. We should draw it on there just to make sure we know what we're doing here. Y coordinate of -2/5 or -0.4, so we got to go down about 2/5 of the way there. There's actually going to be 2 of them, right? There's going to be one on this side and one on this side. Now it's going to be the same value either way. It's going to be plus or minus the same value, right? Either the positive side or the negative side. We can find it all at once here. We know this one is -0.4. This is the one we're looking for, right? And same thing on the other side. So we can just sub that value in that we know, -0.4, and then work out the rest of it here, right? Square that, and then work out the x value. So we have x squared, you know, get your calculator or square it in your head here. That negative, we don't have to worry about that negative. We can just ignore it when we're squaring this, because square the negative becomes positive anyways. This can be 0.16. And so we've got x squared is, if you subtract that, you get 0.84. So now we need to work out what this x is. taking the square root of both sides, we need to remember that we have plus or minus square root of 0.84, which makes sense because we said we're expecting two values here, so it makes sense that we include that plus or minus for those two values. Now I think I do need my calculator, so perhaps I could have got it before anyways. There we are. Move it out of the way. So we need to find out what the square root of 0.84 is. So roughly, if we're going to go to a couple decimal places here, 0.92. So I'm going to have to write it up here because I'm out of room. X is roughly plus or minus 0.92. All right, so either my 2 points that I'm looking for, I might as well write them down here. I either have negative 0.92, negative 0.4, or positive 0.92, negative 0.4. All right, so that's using decimals. We're going to also find exact values for that. Those are approximate values. If you need or want or just like exact values, we can work them out too by that same procedure, right? Instead, we're just going to work with the fractions here. At this point, when we had x squared plus y squared equals 1, and we're going to sub in here negative 2/5 as a fraction instead. Now, if we're going to work out what this is, x squared plus, you square that thing, you just leave it as a fraction, 4 over 25, right? 2 squared over 5 squared. So we have 4 over 25. And then if we want to isolate x squared, move this thing to the other side, right? And we have 1 minus 4 over 25. Or, in other words, if we need to use our fraction skills here, not that you need to write all of this, but I'm going to write it out here just so we see what we're doing. That's what x squared is. That gives us 21 over 25. So then x has to be plus or minus square root of 21 over 25. If you have plus or minus square root of 21 over 25, if one of those values in your fraction is a perfect square, then you can actually evaluate it, and you can say that this is square root of 21 over 5. Change that square root of 25 on the bottom into 5. Pull that out of the square root and make it just the radical on the top. All right, so that's your x coordinate. So you could write the two coordinates of the points. I'm going to write them over here. You could write them as positive root 21 over 5 and then negative 2/5, or you could write them as negative root 21 over 5, negative 2/5. Right, so that's finding it as an exact value there, and up above finding it as a decimal. All right, so that's a look at the unit circle, a circle with a radius of 1, and its equation, x squared plus y squared equals 1, how you can work with coordinates of points, how they're related to that equation.